Getting the folder structure and the way that you organize your entire project in a React application is often a topic that has a lot of strong opinions, right? People say that you should do it this way, and then people say that you should do it the other way instead. And it's really difficult to come here and to make a video on what is the correct approach, because the truth is there is no definitive correct approach to how you want to structure your projects in React. So instead, what I want to do is kind of show you multiple ways that you can approach this problem, multiple ways to organize your React projects, and hopefully give you a very complete overview of what it is to have a proper folder structure in your React applications. At least that's the goal. Now, I also want to mention that everything that I teach in this video, I also cover in my course Project React, and I go way deeper in that course because I actually show you how to take this information and really build a proper big and complex project out of it. And it's also a course that is totally beginner friendly. If you're interested, I'm actually currently also working on the extended version, which is the updated version of this course. It has more modules, more tutorials, more code, and just more content overall. So honestly, now is the best time to get the course. Once again, it's called Project React. I highly recommend it, and it's going to be the first link in the description. All right, so let's begin. So over here, I have my VSCode open. As usual, I have a simple project. It's pretty empty. It's built with Vite, and we're going to use this as our playground to start working with and understanding the different folder structures in React. Now, first, I just want to give credit where credit is due. A lot of the inspiration for this video over here comes from this article, which is a great article on the React folder structures in 5 steps in 2024. This is actually an article that we sent in our newsletter, Import React. It's completely free, and if you want to join, I highly recommend it. You get articles like this and other cool stuff and tutorials about React delivered to your inbox every single week. Again, it's totally free. It's called Import React. You're also going to be able to find it in the description. So first, let's start really small, and let's just start with one file. Let's assume that our entire project is literally just this one file with this app component over here, right? This is usually how a project starts. And for a lot of projects that are really small, that are really trying to do only one thing, oftentimes one file is all that's necessary because you don't have that much code needed to actually accomplish the thing that the project is trying to accomplish. Right, so you could literally have an application that has one component. It has some basic functionality in that component. Maybe it's a to-do list, maybe it's something super simple, and that's it. That's all the application, right? And that's totally valid. This is the first important point, is that having everything in one file might seem like it's a bad approach, like it's bad code or something like that. But actually, if the project is super small, if the project doesn't need anything, you could accomplish everything in just one file, and that is totally fine. Even if, let's come here to the article, let's just take this code over here to just make our lives a little bit simpler. Even if you take all of this code and you just paste it over here, so now you have actually a little bit more of a complexity in your application. You have this list array over here, and then you have one component, 2 components, and 3 components that kind of work together, and maybe just export to these components over here to actually get these errors to go away. Right, the list, we're just not going to do it. Of course, I'm using TypeScript, so it's complaining that I don't have proper types. That's totally fine. Even something like this is valid for a single application that has one file, because again, it's super simple. What if this is the entire application? What if it's just the app component? It just renders a list of some data and maybe makes the fetch to get that list. It just shows all of the movies that are currently playing in a specific theater. If it's just that, if that's all the application needs, honestly, you could get away with just having everything in one file, and there's really nothing wrong with that. No one's going to come here and tell you that you can't do that. There's a lot of projects that have only one file. They're much bigger than this, and it's working for them, right? So it's totally fine. There's nothing wrong against it, and this is a perfect valid approach. Now, realistically, most projects are not going to look like this. The projects that you and I probably are mostly working on are going to require a lot more components, and you cannot get away with putting everything in one simple file. I mean, you could technically, again, no one's stopping you, but really at that point, you have to progress to the next stage, which is to have multiple files for all of these different components. So if you come here to our editor, what that would look like is let's come here and let's make a new file, and let's put this one list like this, and we're just going to do it. Let's make it a little bit clearer. Let's do item list.tsx like this. And then we're going to take everything in here, list item, and then this list component, we're going to remove this and we're going to put this inside of here. Then we're going to do export const, and we're going to rename this to item list like this. And let's just make a type here real quick just to get TypeScript happy, item list props. And that is going to be item. And again, this should have a list of items. So we're going to do items like this. We're going to do any just for now to keep TypeScript happy. Let's put the type here, item list props, and we're going to do items like this. Oh, this is the wrong component. Sorry, this should go here. This should go here. Item list props, that was my mistake. Items, and then we're going to map over items instead. There we go. And now here, this is going to be item card, and this takes in an item, which is going to be, let's see, we're going to move this type over here. There we go. And we're going to do type item card props, item any like this. And as the last step, item card props, and there we go. And now all that we need to do is item card, and we just export. Let's do it here, export default, and we're going to do item list, and we're going to do item list like this. And we're now going to come back here to our component, and we're going to pass here item list, and we're going to pass items, and here we're going to pass our list, which we can also do items like this again. There we go. This is now officially the second step of folder structures, where now we have different files for different components, right? So we have the item list component over here that also has the item card, which we should remove the export because it's not going to be exported. And we're importing those inside of the app component. We're passing this list over here, and we're just actually passing and using the components. Right, so that is the second step. It is very important to note that still here we have no folders. We have no concept of folders, right? Ignore everything else outside of the SRC folder and this assets folder. Again, we're keeping things simple. In terms of the folders that we created for our own code that is not framework or anything dependent, we have no folders. We just have this app component and this item list component, and we're just working within them, importing them into one another and actually using them. And this is also another valid approach that you can take in your React applications. You could get away with just having a bunch of files in one folder and just using that as your entire application. This allows you to have a little bit more complexity as if everything was in one file. It's still not going to allow you to scale to like massive folders and all of that. But if your project doesn't need to have many of these things, if it just needs to have a couple of components here and there and a couple different files, you could easily do that. And this could work. This is also valid. Again, there's nothing wrong with this. And if the project doesn't need anything bigger than that, you shouldn't go ahead and start organizing things into many different folders if the project doesn't need it, right? You could do it if you want to, but you could also get away with not doing it. And this is, again, perfectly valid. Now, before we continue, I just want to take a quick moment to really think about what we're actually doing in this video. Because what we're doing is we're following a method that is called learning by doing, right? You're not just watching theory and like a traditional lecture, you're actually learning by seeing me do the thing, which is great because that's exactly what Brilliant, the sponsor of today's video, is also doing. So Brilliant is a place where you learn by doing. You have thousands of interactive lessons in various topics such as math, data analysis, AI, and of course, more importantly for us, programming. Brilliant is a learning platform that is designed to be uniquely effective. Their first principles approach helps you build understanding from the ground up. Each lesson that you have on there is filled with hands-on problem solving that actually lets you play with concepts, which is a method that has been proven to be 6 times more effective than watching traditional lecture videos. Plus, all of the content on Brilliant is crafted by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers, and professionals from places such as MIT, Caltech, Microsoft, Google, and so much more. Brilliant literally helps you build your critical thinking skills through problem solving instead of memorizing. So while you're building real knowledge on specific topics, you're also learning how to become a better thinker. And they have some really awesome courses. One that I really like is called Thinking in Code, which follows pretty much what we're doing in this video and teaches you solid foundations for computer science that are going to help you directly as a React developer. To try everything that Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/codsolutions, scan the QR code on the screen, or simply click the first link in the description. You're also going to get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thank you once again to Brilliant for sponsoring this video, and now let's continue learning about folder structures in React. Now, the problem with this comes when you have to add more functionality to your code. So now we're going to start progressing into a little bit higher level of scalability. Let's say, for instance, that this item list over here, or this app component, needs to fetch its own data, right? And we're going to have a hook for that. Let's say that we're using React Query, for example, where we're going to want to create a file for those hooks, right? So we're going to come here, we're going to make use, let's see, items query.ts, and let's assume over here that we're exporting. Let's just actually export const use items query, and this is going to be a function that we can just pretend that actually it returns some data. So then we're going to come here to our actual component. We're going to make this into a bracket like this. We're going to make this into a bracket like this, return. Then we're going to do const items equals use items query. And here we're going to pass the items, and here this needs to return something. So let's just return any. Is this going to work? There we go. It also works, right? Let's now say that we have this query over here. We're getting the items, and that's what we're passing here to this component. And then let's say that we come here and we also need to style this. So for example, we're using CSS file, CSS module. So we're going to come here, we're going to create a new file. Let's say that we want to do app.css, right? One for our app. Let's say that we want to do and come here also styles for the actual list, for the item list. So we're going to do item list.css as well, right? To put the styles over here. You can quickly see that things are becoming unorganized, and we're kind of getting a mess in this one big folder, because yes, we do have separate files for everything, but we still have no folders, right? So now at this point, when we're starting to have a bunch of files like this, is the actual point where we would start thinking about actually implementing some sort of folder structure in the application. So for example, we might do, and this is something typical, you've probably seen this, we might come here and we do something like components. And then we're going to put in here all of our actual components. So let's come here, let's do item list. Let's put our item list component inside of here, and let's move it. And let's also update our imports. So now we're actually getting the item list from components/items list. Then we're also going to move this item list.css inside of here, because this does belong to the items list, right? So it makes sense to put it in the same folder. Then let's see, what else do we have? We also have this query over here, which is a hook. So we're going to want to create a new folder called hooks like this. And we're going to want to put this use items query inside of the hooks, so that again it is properly organized into everything that is in the right place. Now already with this, we have an improvement in our application and the way that it can scale. We have separate folders for everything. Everything goes in its own separate folder. It's perfectly fine. If we ever need to add a different type of file, for example, something that is pretty common is a utils folder for any sort of utility, we would create a utils folder over here that we can just use. Let's say, for example, maybe we also have a pages folder, right? If you're using Next.js, this is your app router, but again, different pages that the user can go to in the application, right? You would make a separate folder for that, and then you would put any page inside of that, you would put it inside of this folder to keep things organized. As you can see, having things into multiple folders helps us be organized, and already has made it better than it was before when we just had multiple files without any single folder. Now, you could of course take this one step further as well. You can have subfolders inside of these folders. For example, the items list, right, also has the item list CSS over here. These should go in their own separate folder, because again, they're related, and these files are not specifically going to be related to any other components that we might have in this folder. So what we can do, we can come here, we can do item list like this, and we can put the item list inside of here like so. We can update the imports, we can put the CSS like so, and now we have components over here, and we can just have any amount of components in here. For example, we can have something else. We can do other component like this, and now it's part of the components folder, and anything that is related to it, we can put it inside of that folder, which is great because now we can come here to our items list, right? And we can open up this component, and let's just save this. Let's go back to the item list as well. What we could also do is we could take this item card over here, because currently it's only being used inside of this item list, which means that it doesn't really need to be exported, but we could if we wanted to. We could choose if we wanted to put it inside of here. So do something like item card. If, for example, we knew that the item card was only ever going to be used inside of the item list, we could do that. Or we could also move it outside in the root level of the components, right? We could also do that. And then we would take this code over here, come here, make a new file, item card.tsx, and put the same code in here. And then we're going to do export default item card like this, right? And now what happened over here? What happened? I think for some reason it just didn't copy properly. That's very strange. Anyways, let's try this again. Item card. There we go. We have item card, and now we can do export default item card. And there we go. Now we have item card over here in a separate component. We can come here to item list, and we can just import it directly. And there we go. We have item card inside of item list. We're importing it, and now we made a subfolder, or actually just another folder inside of the components folder, and things are starting to be a little bit more organized. We could do the same thing with the hooks folder here. We could actually create a subfolder inside of here, and we can do queries like this, and we can actually put use items query inside of here, which is really useful if, for example, let's update the imports. If, for example, we want to have different types of hooks. For example, something that is also common in React query is a hook for mutations, right? And you would have something in here. You would have use create item mutation.ts like so. Again, another folder for it for all mutations, and then any mutation that you have inside of your application is going to have a place to go inside of this hooks folder, inside of its own separate subfolder mutations. Now, here's the thing. This is actually a folder structure that probably you've seen before, right? There's a lot of React applications. I would dare even to say that the majority of the React applications out there are following a folder structure that is pretty similar to this, right? And it might differ based on the project, but generally you have everything grouped by type of file that it is. That's very important, right? All components go inside of the components folder, all hooks go inside of the hooks folder, pages, utils, and so on. Every type of file has its own folder that it goes into and may optionally be organized into subfolders within that general folder for the type of file. Now, as great as this folder structure is, and again, it really is a great folder structure, there's a reason why the majority of projects are using it, it also has its limitations. This does not scale on really large applications with a bunch of different files. For example, if you have a project that has 50, 100, 200, 500 sometimes components inside of the components folder, that wouldn't really scale. This usually only happens when you have very large projects with a bunch of different teams working on them, and you have a bunch of different departments and stuff like that. You end up having so many components that you cannot get away with just putting everything inside of the components folder because you have too much. Imagine having to scroll through 200 components inside of this folder to find the thing that you're specifically needing. And then it also gets messy because all of those components are going to be using other components. They're going to be using hooks, utility files. They're going to be inside of pages, inside of bigger components. It's really a mess. And then you have things that are together in terms of the same folder. They share the same folder, but they don't really share the same functionality or even the same domain in the project, right? Let's say that you have a part of the application that's related to authentication, you have a part of the project that's related to items, you have a dashboard, and so on. You have things that, although they share the same folder, they're both components, they're different. One is for authentication, one is for the items. They're never going to be used the same way, and they're never ever going to use even the same other parts of the application, the same hooks or the same utilities, yet they share the same folder. And that's a limitation of putting everything when you're organizing them by file type. Now, when a project gets to that point, you have to change something and you have to migrate to a different structure, a different folder structure that is going to allow you to support multiple components. And that is going to be, instead of grouping everything by the type of file that it is, you group everything by the type of feature that it's related to. And here's how this looks like. So let me just close everything here because we're not going to be working inside of any individual file. Let me just collapse all of these folders here and we're just going to work at the root level. So here inside of the SRC folder, I'm not going to put anything inside of components, hooks, pages, or utils. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call this one features, like this. And this is going to be a group of features that are going to have subfolders, and within those subfolders, we're going to have components, hooks, pages, utilities, and anything else that we might need that is related to that specific feature. So, for example, one of our features is going to be the item, right? So we're just going to make a new folder and we're going to do item like this. And inside of here, we're going to put all of the code that is related to an item, but we're also going to organize it in the way that we had it before because we still want the benefits of folder organization. We just want to have it in a way that can scale better and make it easier for us to have many of these components. So inside of item, I'm going to make a new folder and we're going to call this one components like this. And then inside of here, I'm going to put the item cart over here. It makes sense. I'm going to update the imports. I'm going to put the item list as well. We're also going to put it there because it's related to our components. Let me just close this and save this, right? So now we can actually, now we have components over here, which still has our other component. Again, we're going to leave this here for now, but now we have features, item, and then we have components. These are the components inside of item that are related specifically to the item feature. And then we can take this a step further. We can also make a folder inside of item and we can do hooks like this to put any hooks that are related specifically to the items. So notice here that we're taking the same folder structure that we had before. We're just organizing it by feature and we're nesting that folder structure inside of the main feature inside of the main folder for that specific feature. So for hooks, we can come here and we can actually just take all of this right here and put it directly inside of our mutations, inside of our hooks folder. We can also do the same thing for our queries these as well, we can put them inside of our hooks folder as well. And now this main hooks folder, this is really annoying when everything pops up over here, but it's fine. We can make this work. Now we have here features, item. We have some components for the item card, item list. It's super simple. It's super organized. We have all of our hooks for the item. So again, that is going to be the use items query. That is going to be the mutations, right? Any other hook that we're going to use inside of the item feature, we're going to put inside of this folder over here. Then also, if we have any utilities, we're going to make a utils folder as well. All of these utilities are only going to be used inside of the item. If we have anything related, for example, for the API, we're also going to do this. If we have anything related for the pages, we're also going to put it here, right? I hope that you get the idea by now. Everything that is related to a specific feature, we put it here and we just organize it by feature. And then if we have other features, for example, we're just going to do other like this. We have other features as well. We can take this other component over here. We're just going to have to make a components folder like this inside of other. And then we're going to move this component over here. There we go. Now we have another feature. We have a component over here that does not move. What happened? It just disappeared. Anyways, you get the idea. I literally don't know where this went. They just completely disappeared. You get the idea, right? We would have, maybe because it's an empty component, I think it's here, right? There's nothing inside. Yeah. Let's just make a file, other component.tsx. There we go. Now we have another feature. We have components inside of this feature, and we have the other component. And here we would also do the same thing. We would do hooks, right? For any sort of hooks that are related to this other feature. We would do API, right? If you have API, what else? We would do pages. We would do also utilities, right? Utils like this, right? And now all of a sudden what we have is each folder, right? Each feature inside of each feature folder inside of the features kind of acts as a template of other features. If you want to create other features, you just take this folder over here, you just copy it and you paste it and you rename this to your other feature, right? Feature 2 like this, right? And now inside of here you have API, components, hooks, pages, and everything is really neatly organized. Another benefit of this is that now you can have multiple teams each work on different features without really affecting one another. You know that the item feature team is going to work on the item. They're going to work within this folder. It's kind of their own mini application, right? Which is again very scalable. And ultimately, this is kind of the best way to really scale your React applications and to organize everything in a way that really scales to hundreds of components. And then you might be thinking, well, what do we do with these component folders over here, like these root components here? Well, what you could do is you could put in here, if you choose, any sort of shared components, any sort of shared functions that are shared across different features. For example, you could have a UI folder over here, all of our UI components, for example, like a button.tsx, right? That would maybe go inside of this shared components because every single feature probably would use a button of some sort. For hooks as well, if you have any hooks that are general related to the entire application, you could also do it and put it there. What you could also do is inside of features, if you want to really keep everything exactly the same way, what you could do is you could also do something like share it. And you can put in here exactly the same structure. You can put API, components, hooks, pages, and those would only be things that are actually shared across multiple features. You could also do that, and then you could kill all of these other folders over here, right? You could kill the hooks folder, you could kill the pages folder, you could kill the utils folder, and so on. Let me just kill all of these. There we go, components UI. That's the last one. And now all that you have is you have an src and then you have features, and everything is nested inside of these features. And again, you might prefer this, the project might benefit from this, and this is a very valid approach to take. Ultimately, what it comes down to, and really what the point of this entire article is that we just kind of did not read at all, but trust me, that's the content over here, at least my version of it. Ultimately, the entire point of this is that you have different projects, you have different sizes, and there's no one feature, there's no one organization structure that actually makes sense and you can say that would apply to any project of any size, of any complexity. Again, going back to the initial point of the video, if you have a project that is super small, it just has a very few or just one functionality, you wouldn't go and start creating feature folders, organizing everything, because that's a lot of overhead to do when all that your project does is it just has a simple feature, right? And this goes the same. If your project has a couple of features, maybe you can just get away with having things in different files and not even bother having any sort of folder structure at all, because the project doesn't need that. But if you have a project that scales, that actually needs all of this, then you can start thinking about putting things into folders, organizing things neatly, and now you've seen the different ways of doing this, right, for the different levels. Again, you might just jump straight to features right off the bat because that's what you prefer, right? You're thinking ahead, you want to future-proof your application, if you will, and you just want to put everything in the features. You're totally fine to do that. You could also just stick with a normal components file type based approach where everything is organized by the type of file. You could also do that. That would also work, and it does work for the majority of the React projects out there. That's why making this video is kind of difficult, because there is no one correct way to do it, and again, it really depends on the type of project and what the project actually needs. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos just like this one, make sure to leave this video a big thumbs up. You can also click here to subscribe, or you can click here to watch a different video of mine that YouTube seems to think that you're really going to enjoy. And with that being said, my name has been Darius Cousin. This is Cousin Solutions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.